Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to WatchBox and thanks for logging on. As usual, everything you see here on this show is for sale with names, references, and when available, prices in the description below. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com to buy. And because the holidays are approaching, we are looking to bulk up our inventory, paying our top prices of the year. One watch, an entire collection, we're interested. No upper limit on value. Once again, to sell to us, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com. All right, let's front load the fun in this episode with a few favorites from Lange Sohne of Saxony. These guys pretty much only make Grail watches, and we're starting with a big piece. Launched at SIHH 2011, this is the 41.9mm red gold Lange Sohne Richard Lange tourbillon pour le mérite. Now the timepiece, of course, includes the titular tourbillon on the dial side, and we'll get a little bit closer here. The dial is made of sterling silver and then galvanized this silver white color. It is a regulator with minutes, hours, and seconds separate. It has the extraordinary rare feature of hacking seconds on a tourbillon, and then you can see on the reverse side there is a fusée and chain. So the fusée and chain is a constant force device born of the pocket watch era, and it is the rationale for the pour le mérite nomenclature on this watch, as the pour le mérite series, dating back to the original tourbillon pour le mérite of 1994, always includes the fusée and chain. The chain has 636 parts. It has a width of 1/4 of a millimeter, and it's 20 centimeters long with the strength to vertically suspend 2 kilograms. Now, the way this works is the fusée, which you can see features a planetary differential, so it can be wound and supply force to the escapement at the same time, but it runs along a sort of inclined plane in the form of a spiral track around the barrel, and as the barrel discharges, the chain moves to the larger diameter. Like bicycle gears, as the force diminishes, the mechanical advantage increases, thus delivering constant force to the escapement and allowing constant amplitude. You can also see that it is a beautifully made movement, absolutely blazing with color and fine finish, with a diamond capped zone on the underside of the tourbillon. Now, one of the most distinctive features of this watch is not aesthetic, or at least not full-time, it is mechanical, and that is the jumping disc that completes the dial to allow you to more accurately read the hours. Throw the watch on the wrist. Note it features a full deployant clasp, which is an uncommon feature for Lange watches. The timepiece, approximately 42 millimeters in diameter, wears well on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. A truly extraordinary watch, right down to the finishing on the tourbillon. You can see it is wire style and entirely black polished as it vanishes and then explodes into view as I tilt it through the light. Now, for 2012, Lange Sohne upgraded its traditional dotograph date and flyback chronograph. It is a flyback chronograph. It does have the famed double-digit date. It has a black galvanized sterling silver dial, but new was a 41mm case, a power reserve indicator, and a power reserve that now surpasses 60 hours rather than the 36 hours of the original. It's also loomed, which makes it a remarkably versatile watch, and you can see this example in platinum, beautifully decorated on its reverse side, as was the Richard Lange you just saw. You can see it uses the same nickel, copper, zinc, or German silver alloy for the bridges and plates. The chronograph components are silver and steel, but the copper in the nickel, copper, zinc gives it that golden hue. You can see both black polish and fired blue screws. You can see that everything is beautifully beveled on its side with a mirrored shine both to the bridges and to the components of the chronograph. And then you have that same freehand engraving on the balance cock, stop seconds, an 18K beat rate, and a handmade overcoil hairspring. All of that with a lovely invisible column wheel and lateral clutch architecture. Take a look at the number of inward and outward angles on the chronograph clutch alone, the hallmark of ultimate fine finish. Accepting the tough assignments, black polishing, inward angles, outward angles, and that's just on the chronograph clutch. Again, a gorgeous piece, a little bit smaller than the watch you just saw, but bigger than the original dotograph. On the wrist, it wears with full size but not oversized present. Still elegant, still understated, still distinctly Teutonic in character. It's just a little bit bigger with a longer power reserve and additional complication on the dial. Now here is simplicity incarnate. We talked about the Pour le Mérite series. This is the Richard Lange Pour le Mérite. Richard Lange, of course, the series using Roman numerals at Lange Sohne, and this was a 200-piece limited edition in red gold for 2009. It includes a multi-piece enamel dial. Grand faux enamel is slightly off-white. It's not bone white. It's not paper white. And I have my paper right here to demonstrate that. It has a little bit of warmth to it. On this dial, black, white, shocks of red, and of course the fired blue alpha-style hands at center. This is a 40.5 millimeter watch that wears considerably easier and flatter on the wrist than the complications you just saw. Now you can see how it wears on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. You can also see that it's fairly flat. The case back is as spectacular as the tourbillon, as you have that same fusee and chain system whereby, and I'll wind a little bit right here, you can see the chain moving from the barrel to the fusee as I wind it up. You'll also see it has elaborately freehand engraved half bridges for the escape wheel as well as the balance, a black polished swan's neck adjustment system, and you can see that the ratchet and pawl mechanism atop the barrel is entirely black polished. You get that same 20 centimeter long, 636 part fusee chain that has the same degree of strength as on the larger watch. It's the same system, allowing the balance to maintain constant amplitude for 36 hours before a stopworks will halt the watch rather than allow it to run imprecisely. Again, a spectacular piece with a flagship-worthy full deployment clasp. This is not a feature you'll find on most Lange watches, and you can see this is number 179 of 200 from the 2009 model year. Fusee and chain enamel dial limited edition, a watch of dreams. Now here's a watch that I often described as the closest thing to a Swiss-made Lange watch, the Jaeger-LeCoultre Duometre chronograph, a timepiece, as you see here, made in 200 pieces in white gold for the 2010 model year. It's a watch that I owned for the longest time, about 50 millimeters from lug to lug, just over 13 millimeters thick, and 42 millimeters in gray gold, that is white gold that never needs to be plated. The watch has a dramatic dial featuring chronograph as well as time, two separate power reserves, each of 50 hours. There's a mono counter for the chronograph at roughly 2 o'clock on the dial. White gold hands are for time, rose gold hands are for the chronograph, and the dial is an exquisite matte black with silver, not white, silver printing. Now there is a seconds hand at center. You can see that the time running seconds and the chronograph seconds are coaxial. It is a mono pusher and it has a 1/6 of a second chronograph foudroyant down at 6 o'clock. When you stop it, you can read the hours, tens of minutes, single digit minutes, seconds, and sixths of seconds. It's also fun to reset it. Now turn it all over and you can see the movement that makes it happen. Manual wind caliber 380. Not only does the watch have a Lange-like case profile with a squat cylindrical volume and stepped out lugs, just like a Lange, but the movement is made of the same material. They don't call it German silver in the Vallée du Jeu, they call it Mosso, and it's made of the same material. Nickel, copper, and zinc, with the copper giving it that golden hue. You can see two mainspring barrels. This inspired by a watch in the JLC Heritage Gallery from 1881, a minute repeating chronometer pocket watch, two drivetrains. One operates the balance, one drives all of the indications on the dial. So when you double the power requirement by activating the chronograph, you do not reduce the amplitude of the balance. Double the power requirement, double the power. Two drivetrains, one escapement, and that's how the watch can run for 50 hours with the chronograph in operation, losing neither power reserve or amplitude. It is the ultimate chronograph chronometer. The watch also includes a full white gold deployment clasp to match, and that's desirable because later Duometre models would include pin buckles, a cheapening of the model line with which I do not agree. This watch is uncompromised. People are obsessed with the Rolex Sub right now, and frankly, I'm not. Existing models are more interesting to me than the new ones, and that's always the case, starting in the mid-1970s. Now, of course, this is a 1680. It's a sub with a date from roughly 1975, given the late 3,900,000 serial number. It's not quite 40 millimeters, as these older subs are closer to 39 or even 38.5 in diameter, but it is a lovely and lush and evenly patinaed dial. You can see that the only component that does not match is the seconds hand. You'll note that hours, minutes, dial, and even the bezel pearl are a lovely aged tritium patina. The dial's also remarkably clean, as there are no marks, no tarnish, or oxidation. The watch features a wonderfully crisp box section sapphire and a bracelet that is a later 93150 oyster bracelet. You can see internally it has a flip lock dive extension. This timepiece, of course, a certified chronometer in its day with a caliber 1570 inside, can still run within chronometer specifications. So while I wouldn't recommend diving with a vintage Rolex Submariner, I can absolutely recommend the watch for accurate time telling. The dial on this watch is the highlight. You can see the lugs mark this as sort of a 3+ if you're using the automotive scale of 1 being concours, 5 being erect. This one's somewhere between 3 and 2, with the most obviously worn part of the watch being the lug structures. It's not a perfect watch. It wouldn't be described as a time capsule, but it's a strong daily driver. As you can see, there is no protrusion of the spring bars out of the lugs. So the lugs still have a lot of volume. They're just not time capsule level. The dial, however, is extraordinary. This is a watch that you can wear every day with vintage charm, Rolex integrity, and still quite an impressive chronometric performance with no real compromise, and you don't have to be terrified about nicking it or scratching it. Very good, but not perfect. That's how I describe that watch. This, however, is very close to factory spec. Of course, this is also a much newer watch. The 116618LN Lunette Noire. It is a current, well, I should say, recent generation Submariner, as we have a new Submariner. And this watch with super case, ceramic bezel insert featuring yellow gold deposits, yellow gold hands and indices, and of course, the signature Glidelock clasp of this generation and later subs. You have quite a bit of adjustability. You have 2mm increments, 10 of them, allowing you to finely size for the sake of a dive suit or expand your sizing as activity and hot weather dictate. Now, of course, you have a watch that's remarkably flat for a diver and remarkably formal for a Submariner. In yellow gold, this is a watch that could be used as a dress watch, or it could be a very exuberant sports watch. If you're along the French or Italian Riviera, and this is the kind of watch that represents the tools of the trade for plying the seas or the beaches, you could absolutely wear this every day. This is a watch for a guy who's got panache, who's not afraid to be seen, and might even relish that role. This is a timepiece that has all the integrity of Rolex construction, right down to the use of their own gold, smelted in their own foundry on the industrial outskirts of Geneva. Chronometer certified, 300 meters water resistant with the world's silkiest diving bezel. Let's have a listen. It's everything the Sub is, plus it is fabulous. Capital F. This is an impressive watch, and again, I don't have the panache to wear this, but the man makes the watch. This might be a perfect match for you. This is more of a tmosso Rolex. The Rolex Milgauss, the discontinued and much loved white dial version that was phased out after 2014 with the arrival of the Z Blue. The Z Blue is my exact match as a Rolex that's after my own heart. Wacky, but not preposterous. Yellow gold is too much for me, but my goodness, do I love that lightning bolt seconds hand in orange. I love the fact that the indices themselves are blackened and the lume for the hours is orange. So too are the hash marks and the minutes and seconds outboard. A lovely watch, remarkably anti-magnetic. Keep in mind that with a niobium zirconium blue oxidized anti-magnetic hairspring and a soft iron cage around this movement, it is probably far more than Milgauss anti-magnetic. 80,000 ampere per meter. Milgauss, I suspect this watch goes far beyond the factory rating because the watch has been rated at 1,000 Gauss since the 50s, and frankly, the technology has outpaced the nomenclature of the watch. 40 millimeters in diameter, just over 13 millimeters thick, and about 50 millimeters, really more like 49 lug to lug. It's an easy watch to wear. It is a chronometer. It is 100 meters water resistant. It is shock resistant, anti-magnetic, water resistant, and shock resistant. It is all three of those at once. Oyster bracelet, and you can see internally it has the Easy Link system, so you've got 5 millimeters of in and out adjustability built in. This is from my favorite family of Rolex watches, and the white dial is the one that collectors are beginning to notice as it's long out of production, and alongside the Z Blue, one of the most distinctly different to the Milgauss, without the wackiness of the Z Blue that, frankly, I love, but not everyone does. Okay, Grubel Forsey. Differentiel d'égalité. Launched in 2018, this is how Grubel Forsey does a constant force escapement. 44 millimeters, you can see in white gold. The watch is part of a limited series. This is number 18 of 33. And the watch is as large as it is because the movement is large. The movement is 9.99 millimeters thick to give it beautiful depth and 36.4 millimeters in diameter. Now, there's a lot going on here. Let's start with the basics. The watch has a constant force differential, which combines both differential gearing and a remontoire d'égalité that re-energizes every second. That doubles as the engine underpinning the constant seconds deadbeat display. You also have a sweep seconds display just below that, and on the reverse side of the case you can see an extraordinarily large and complex black polished zero reset system for the seconds sub-register. So take a look at how this watch operates when you zero the seconds out to set it precisely to the second. The idea being that this is a Grubel Forsey watch geared purely toward chronometry. The balance stops, the second stops, and you can synchronize to your reference time. 60-hour power reserve. The watch features manual winding, a power reserve indicator, a fired blue hand over a white gold hand engraved and lacquered scale. You can see wire brush frosting on the bridge that underpins the seconds hand, or I should say the cannon pinion, hours and minutes. 2 barrels vertically stacked, they are fast barrels, and then you have a angled and black polished bridge for the balance. Note that it's a handmade overcoil, that it's free sprung, 6 position adjustment, one more than a standard chronometer. And if you take a look at that balance bridge, you can see not only is it black polished, but it's continuously rounded and black polished all the way around. You can see to good effect the level of finishing when you view this watch diagonally. You can see the spherical differential just below the cannon pinion bearing the 2 hands. So you can see between the seconds hands and the cannon pinion there is that coiled spring. That's the top of the differential. You can see the 2 barrels. What you can't quite see is that all of the pinion leaves and teeth of the works are beautifully beveled and mirror polished on their edges. Now you can also see the level of beveling on the edge of the bridges. This is also nickel, copper, and zinc. It's that much short, but it's also been rhodium plated to give a silvery shine. You can see the quality of the beveling. When you turn the watch over, you can see the same quality of finish, but you can also see jewels set in golden chaton, the black polish across the hacking system. And if you're wondering what all this text represents, it is the philosophy of design, manufacture, and finishing of Grubel Forsey. They want you to know what they believe, and they've put it on the watch and memorialized forever, immortal in French, which is the lingua franca, appropriately enough, of La Chaux de Fonds, where Grubel Forsey watches are made. They make 100 watches a year. They have 100 people on staff, one of the highest ratio of staff to finished products in the watch industry, and the reason is all of that fine finish. There's the likes of Romain Gauthier, Chronometrie Fernand Berthoud, Philippe Dufour, and Grubel Forsey. Those are the names that stand apart, the best of the best in high horology finish. And with a Grubel Forsey, you just get more of it because the watches and the movements inside them are built bigger. Bigger to be seen, bigger to be enjoyed. Let's talk about 2 1990s dress watches on full bracelets. Let's start with the Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso Night and Day. This is a model that originally launched in the late 1990s in the Grand Taille case, which is to say it's just under 26 millimeters wide and 42.2 millimeters from lug to lug. The watch has an extraordinary dial with hand-painted Piguet Arabic numerals, and you can see quite a bit of complication here as the watch includes a power reserve indicator, a night and day indicator, and then there is a moon phase indicator. All of this is in gorgeous white gold, and as you can see, JLC building its own cases. You can see the maker's mark on the case, so they make the bracelet, they make the case, they make the clasp, and they make the watch. On the reverse side, caliber 825. Now this is based on the 822, but it has the additional complications added on the dial side. You can also see that it is impressively decorated with real fired blue screws, and you can see those richly ridged Côte de Genève. You'll also appreciate the fact that there is a wonderful traditional architecture to this movement, as it has a center wheel rather than an off-centered great wheel. So this is built very much in traditional horological architecture, where the largest wheel on the train after the barrel is right at the center of the bridges. You'll also note that this movement was designed for this sized case, as it's both shaped and properly dimensioned to fill out the Grand Taille case. Now, the bracelet is beautifully made and remarkably supple. You can see there are small individual links. It has a chainmail look to it. I'm going to pop it open. This is all gray gold, in case you're wondering. It's white gold that need not be plated. The bracelet is handsomely manufactured and deluxe, as you can see white gold screws rather than pins and sleeves used for sizing this bracelet. When you throw it on the wrist, I used to own 2 Grand Taille case Reversos, and I adored those watches. They were the perfect fit for my wrist size. Whether you wear the watch with the dial side visible or you flip it to enjoy the movement, it's perfectly suited in either case. This is a little bit more mysterious. It's likely to draw some stares and questions from your colleagues, but it is iconic of the modern day Reverso, which is no longer a sports watch. It's been a long time since the Reverso was a sports watch. Today, the rotating case is ideally suited for a second dial and complications or a display case back. And in the case of this watch, you get both complications and the display case back. This is a modern legend, a real connoisseur's piece. People who know JLC love this watch. This one, however, is a cult watch and underrated. This is the Patek Philippe Neptune, reference 5081 1J. It launched in the mid-1990s, and it was a rare Patek Philippe full bracelet sports watch that flew somewhat under the radar. Now, the timepiece is ultra thin for an automatic. At 8.1 millimeters thick, it rivals the 5711. You can see that the case lines are extraordinarily strong, and this watch is remarkably intact, as all of the character lines are razor sharp. If you look at the edge of the bezel, you can see that the engine-turned bezel is as sharp as a blade on its edge, and that all the way around. The crown guards are entirely intact and unadulterated, and if you look carefully, you can see that the bracelet is fixed to the case using screws and bars, not spring bars. You'll also note that the bracelet is fully integrated with gorgeous alternating polished and striated gadroon-style links. It's a remarkably strong bracelet, built the old-fashioned way, in-house by Patek Philippe. Strong enough to be a sports watch bracelet, but supple enough and elegant enough to be a dress watch bracelet. You can also see on the underside, there are plenty of gaps to avoid pinching skin or pulling hair. It also won't trap wrist heat. And rather than the modern pins and sleeves used for bracelet assembly, Patek Philippe, which built this bracelet and clasp, used white gold screws inside the removable links rather than pin sleeves. You can also see there's a small Patek Philippe Calatrava cross medallion on the buckle. The case is full, strong, striking, and strident, as it projects outward with forceful angular lugs unexpected on a dress style reference. Although it is a sports watch, it does have some dressy elements to it, including the Roman numerals on the dial. And by the way, this is both a Sigma dial and a tritium dial. And you can see it features gold or gilt style printing for an inboard minutes and seconds track. Inside, automatic caliber 315, and the watch, as was customary during the 1990s, has a solid case back that makes it a little bit more robust on the wrist as there's more mass, but also makes it thinner as display case backs thicken watches. You can see just how thin this watch is. Somewhere between a dress watch and a sports watch. I can't really make up my mind which it is, but this is a timepiece that's at home in any environment, and as you can see, under any cuff or tight sleeve. This is one of the truly underrated modern Patek Philippe watches, and especially in dramatic full yellow gold with a black dial, a Sigma dial, a tritium dial. This is a burgeoning collectible, a class of collectible Patek Philippe that the mainstream market hasn't quite discovered yet, and that's just fine for me. I don't think you should pay twice retail for a Nautilus. I think you should go out and buy something like this that flies below the radar. Now, sticking with our theme of Patek Philippe for a moment, this is a watch rarely seen. This is the 5961P. It's a platinum baguette bezel, baguette diamond index, blue dial, flyback annual calendar chronograph. 40.5 millimeters in platinum. The watch is remarkably impressive in that it manages to be masculine, it manages to be technically competent. It manages to be discreet in spite of its extravagance. There's a lot going on here. It's not your typical diamond Patek Philippe, most of which are going to be ladies' 24s. This is designed for a man's sensibility, and in doing so, it keeps its diamonds relatively low-key. The bezel is unmistakable, but at the same time, the use of platinum, a white metal, tones down the overall composition. Now, on the dial, you can see that the diamond indices echo the Patek Philippe Nautilus 40th anniversary pieces, also the 5170p, and this is one of the best use of diamonds on a men's watch. As you can see, the baguette indices supplanted by 2 in brilliant cut down at 7 o'clock and 5, framing a dial that is a gloss blue. It may look black on my screen, but it's a gloss blue. Now, there is a flyback chronograph that you can reset and restart with a single push of the trigger down at 4 o'clock. You also see there's a coaxial indicator for the chronograph, a mono counter, if you will, down at 6 o'clock that has chronograph hours and chronograph minutes superimposed. There's also an AM/PM indicator. That's what that little hole is. It'll turn dark during those times when you should not use the pusher adjusters to adjust the calendar. And it is an annual calendar, which you need to adjust only once a year during the jump from February to March. There is a small power reserve indicator for the 55-hour automatic winding power reserve. And on the reverse side, you can see free-sprung automatic winding, Patek Philippe seal, silicone hairspring, caliber CH28520, which when it debuted back in 2006, before the silicone hairspring assuredly, but when it debuted back in 2006, it was Patek Philippe's first ever in-house automatic winding chronograph. Now it features both column wheel and vertical clutch integration of the chronograph complication, which means courtesy of the column wheel, it is very crisp, and courtesy of the vertical clutch, the chronograph starts without any jump or stagger. Moreover, since the watch doesn't feature running seconds on the dial, the vertical clutch allows you to just leave the chronograph running so you can have center seconds and just read the center seconds along with the minutes and hours. And though the watch doesn't have hacking seconds, if you are using the center seconds as your running seconds, set the time and then activate the flyback. Now you've synchronized to a reference time as though you had a zero reset system. The watch features a diamond set Calatrava cross buckle, which is an extravagant, extraordinary, and beautiful act of attention to detail by Patek Philippe. A truly special watch and not too large at 40.5 millimeters. This is the only 5961 that I've encountered, so rarity and exclusivity are assured. Let us talk about integrated bracelets. Now, this is actually a 2020 watch that is just now becoming available on pre-owned markets. This is really what the Bulgari Octo Finissimo Automatique should have been from the beginning. Highly water resistant at 100 meters with a screw down crown. It's a combination of polished and satin finished stainless steel that does more justice to the angular facets and contrasting curves and creases of this watch than the original media blasted titanium of the 2017 original. The watch is only about 6.7 millimeters thick, which is to say it's very close to the standard 5.2 millimeter thick basic watch, but with the 100 meters of water resistance, this is now a full-fledged sports watch. As you can see, very flat, under 7 millimeters thick, 40 millimeters in diameter, only 46 millimeters lug to lug. It wears well on just about any wrist. The watch feels less toy-like in steel, and as you can see, the contrast really plays up on the bracelet where you have both satin and polish. On the reverse side of the case, you have caliber BVL 138, 60-hour power reserve, automatic winding, high horology execution. It's a 36 millimeter movement with a 2.23 millimeter thickness, allowing this watch to be ultra thin. It also features a platinum, not tungsten, not gold, but platinum micro rotor for a thin profile and ultimate winding efficiency. As you can see, the Côte de Genève are handsomely laid down by a abrasive wheel. They are not uniformly dark, and you can, well, I'll do my best to show this, but bracelet watches can be tough to show. You can see that they are not uniformly light across. One edge is always darker. That's how you know it's abrasive wheel and not stamped Côte de Genève. You'll also note if you get close to the bridges, and here's a good angle, you can see them lighting up. They're started by mechanical means, but they're finished by manual means to create that bright and mirror-like rounded bevel. Of course, it is a manufacturer caliber built in the Vallée de Joux, the old Gerald Gente and Daniel Roth manufacturer, which Bulgari purchased back in 2000. Bulgari makes every part of its watch: bracelet, clasp, case, dial, and movement. It has all of those faculties within its orbit. So Bulgari is probably the newest fully integrated high horology manufacturer in Switzerland, and you can swim with this one. Let's talk about a more traditional integrated bracelet, watch. This one, not from the old Gerald Gente work, but from Gerald Gente himself in 1972. Now, of course, this is an evolution. This is the 41mm Royal Oak chronograph made from 2012 through 2016, meaning it has the symmetrical 3 dials and true screw-down pushers. The timepiece features a lovely Grand Tapisserie dial in black, and we'll get close here so you can see it. The dial is still cut on a pantograph lathe, the old-fashioned way. Bright red registers, as you can see, red gold polished chapter rings for each of the chronograph registers in constant seconds, and the watch with screw-down crown and pushers, 50 meters water resistant and thus swimmable. Underneath the case back, caliber 2385, which is a Frédéric Piguet 1185 automatic column wheel vertical clutch integrated chronograph caliber with a 40-hour power reserve. So you have Frédéric Piguet inside Audemars Piguet, a hand-finished, hand-adjusted movement, and a watch with surpassing beauty in its hand finish. The bracelet takes between 10 and 12 hours to hand finish, and that's before you even get to the bezel and the case. An extraordinary watch in that it is very laborious to create as you see it. The devil, or I should say perhaps the delight, is in the details. The slight recess of the white gold bolts inside the bezel, the break between the polished edge of the bezel and the satin finish top, the angularity of the case in juxtaposition to the round profile of the sapphire and the dial. You can also see the contiguous form, the sweep of the lugs into the taper of the bracelet, and the use of a continuous bevel that flares from the middle of the case over the lug hoods and runs unimpeded down the edges of the individual links. This is high art in case making, bracelet making, and dial fabrication, as good as it gets, with a credible high horology movement on the inside. Now, let's talk about upping the ante. This is the rarest and most desirable version of the 2004 Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Juan Pablo Montoya, dedicated to the Colombian Formula One ace, most notable for his exploits with the Williams BMW team. This is a watch that was designed, at least aesthetically, in consultation with AP's partially owned partner Richard Mille, meaning this watch has an impressive pedigree, Audemars Piguet and Montoya notwithstanding. Now you can see automotive imagery dominates throughout. This watch was part of a series of 3 made in titanium, rose gold, and platinum, 1,000 in titanium, 500 in rose gold, and 100 in platinum, of which you see one in my hand. The external bezel has been evacuated in part to expose the individual bolts. As you can see, they are a characteristic form and design that is supposed to evoke the bolts, the center lock bolts of automotive racing wheels. Now you can see there is also a center lock reference in the crown, which is designed to represent the interface with the air gun that removes the bolts from the wheels. You can also see that the chronograph pushers have the fashion of exhaust stacks, and the intermediate plots that join the strap to the case have the form of automotive gas or brake pedals. You can also see that there's a subtle flag motif across the dial, and you can use your imagination, but it's quite obviously a checkered flag, albeit very subtle. The dial, of course, is extravagant, with an unusual skeleton application of the Audemars Piguet minute and hour hands on the dial. Again, this is more automotive imagery designed to be techno-industrial in fashion. And the reverse side, featuring a drilled-out rotor, again, evocative of automotive imagery, not so much modern Formula One, in which carbon fiber predominates, but the drilled-out metal imagery certainly characteristic of past racing cars. And you can see that that same evacuated bolt design, whereby the outer face of the caseback, you can see that same evacuated bolt design echoes that of the bezel. There's also inset carbon fiber within the bezel to remind you that that is the new wonder material in motorsports. Still, you have that evocative drilled out rotor, you have a 21 karat winding mass, a JLC 889 base caliber, and all of this 100 meters. So put it on the proper strap and it is abundantly water resistant. The timepiece is big. Although technically marketed as a 42 at the time, in reality, this was probably the first true 44mm Royal Oak Offshore, as in case size, stance, and square pusher design, it anticipated the 2011 arrival of a full-time 44mm Royal Oak offering. Along with the Rubens Barrichello 2, this is considered to be the best ever Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore, and as you can see, objectively the best of the best, as this is the rarest and most attractive of the Montoyas. Jumping real quick to FP Journe, let's talk about one of the earliest automatic FP Journe models. There's a lot that's discontinued about this watch. Let's talk about all the different ways. The calendrier, the annual calendar complication, was discontinued after 2014. The 38mm case, which you see here in platinum, was discontinued after 2015. We have, as you can see, a brass movement, the first generation of the 5-day power reserve automatic octa-caliber 1300. This was discontinued midway through the 2004 production season. And then if you look at the case back, you can see that this has double hallmarks as well as a maker's mark of Eleanor of Paris. And as you can see, this is a 03 manufactured case, 2003. After mid-2008, the Eleanor-made cases were phased out as FP Journe purchased Eleanor and moved it to Geneva as his own in-house case factory. So we have a lot of discontinued factors here. This one also features its original bidirectional winding system, which was phased out in roughly mid-2007 as FP Journe upgraded to unidirectional winding. So this watch has all of its original period features as well as tremendous wearability and a wonderfully animated annual calendar with a retrograde date. You can see the dial is a lovely frosted white gold, and it's a perfectly wearable watch as these earlier 38mm Journe timepieces are becoming highly collectible. When you combine the brass movement, the Eleanor case, the discontinued complication, and of course, the 38mm size, this is a watch that is complicated, that is rare, that is usable, that is romantic, and yet practical, as you can use the calendar system every day to date emails, memos, and correspondence, and very wearable. It's only 44.5mm from lug to lug. We are in the home stretch now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a watch that's underrated, and it is the Omega Ploprof. This is a watch that originally was launched during the 1970s, a bid for a Comex contract that never happened. The timepiece became a bit of a cult watch, and its iconic profile with the elaborate crown guard structure and the plunger-activated bezel release continued to animate the imaginations of Omega collectors over the years, up to the point that Omega decided to reissue the watch in 2009. Larger, more complex, and more technically capable, the reborn Ploprof is Omega's most advanced diver. As you can see, it's a 1,200-meter diver. It features the Co-axial 60-hour power reserve caliber 8500. A few things have changed with the crown structure, which now operates more conventionally than the original, but as you can see, it still uses a full all-aspect crown guard that is all the way around, and it uses a plunger system to keep that guard as well as the crown properly aligned and protected from shock. Now the watch, because it's a caliber 8500, has a travel time hour display, so you can quickly move that while you are traveling without disrupting the seconds, without disrupting the minutes. The bezel now features a sapphire cap, and it's fully loomed. When you push down the trigger, you can move it in either direction. So if you want to line it up with the minute hand and have an impromptu 0 to 60-minute count-up timer, you can easily do so. And the clasp is Omega's finest, as not only is it a trigger-activated deployant, so you push the triggers on both sides and it pops open, but it also has a number of subsidiary features, including a push-button slider that gives you a huge amount of incremental adjustment, and then there is a fold-out dive extension. Altogether, you get almost 50 millimeters of adjustment, whether incremental or all-out. It tremendously increases the flexibility of the watch. Now, though the watch is reputed to be huge, the reality is it's only 48 millimeters from lug to lug, so although it's 55 millimeters from roughly 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, all that distance is down the wrist. It's with the direction of the wrist, it's not across. As a result, even a relatively compact wrist like mine can wear the Ploprof. The style is extraordinary, and it's anything but a discreet watch, and yes, it's going to get hung up on your cuff, but this is a remarkably capable ergonomic package, a diver that's certainly more capable than you are. I don't care of your certification. This is a watch that exceeds any human requirement, as once you get down to 4,000 feet, it's pretty much your watch and the fishes. You're not there anymore. Now, a quick look on the underside of the case, you can see there's a helium escape valve. This is a feature that the original Ploprof did not have. The original was said to be so hermetically sealed that there was no need for a helium escape valve because surely none could enter the case. I don't buy that, and I'm glad that in the modern era, the most capable Omega diver comes with a helium escape valve. Now, taking a quick look at what else I've got, limited editions, starting with the Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean Casino Royale, one of the less extravagant and less ostentatious Bond special series. This is the original 45.5mm Planet Ocean. Remember, Casino Royale came out in 2006, and the Planet Ocean launched in 2005, so this watch was still a very current release, and the Planet Ocean line was still quite new at the time the first Daniel Craig Bond film arrived. I'm going to quickly pull this one off of its pin buckle and throw it on the wrist. It's a big watch, but it's not thick like the later Planet Ocean says. It's under 15 millimeters thick, and it actually sits lower on the wrist. It's a limited edition, and I use that word with the imaginary finger parenthetical, of 5,007 pieces. So objectively, it's not an uncommon watch, but it is a technically capable watch, a memorable Bond special series, and you can see on the reverse side there is a commemoration memorializing the film, as well as the fact that this is an individually numbered series of 5007. Inside, caliber 2500 coaxial chronometer, and of course, the Planet Ocean features 600-meter water resistance and a helium escape valve. Let's hear the bezel. With two big dive watches passing across the screen, I think we need to do a loom shot. Okay, here is the Ploprof. As you can see, fully loomed bezel. And here is the Planet Ocean. As you can see, robustly loomed with a particularly bright luminant. And because I know you're wondering, here's the Rolex Submariner. Okay, I mentioned we're in the home stretch, and I'm finishing up with a piece that has great sentimental value. This was from the second series of Omega DeVille coaxial chronometers. The first was launched back in 1999, and it consisted of 99 yellow gold with black dial, 99 rose gold with silver dial, 999 of each, and then finally there were 99 pieces of the salmon dial platinum model. So 999, 999, 99, and then for 2004, there was the coaxial small seconds, a 699-piece limited edition, a little bit bigger than the 1999 model, which was 37.5. This is a more modern 38.5, and it features a small second sub-register on a modern interpretation of the classical Constellation pie pan. You can see it's faceted, it's sloped, it has wonderfully vintage nostalgic finish, a silver satin granate, as well as Roman numerals. Let me do my best here. I think my focus is beginning to betray me. But you can see the use of the combination of the geometric indices in rose gold with Roman numerals. Now the watch uses the caliber 2300. You can also see it features 1950s inspired stepped lugs. If you look at the historic reference 2637, you'll see this lug fashion from the 1950s Omega catalog. And on the reverse side, you can see a caliber 2300A from the very first generation of coaxial chronometers. This is just after Omega had adopted the George Daniels system. This is an historic and collectible watch that marks one of the earliest Omega applications of the George Daniels coaxial direct and indirect impulse escapement technology. In red gold, nice and thin, well-sized, and universally wearable, this is a collectible piece that you can nevertheless still wear and enjoy on a daily basis. And approaching 20 years of age, this is now a borderline vintage timepiece, wonderfully intact and unpolished. This is a way to get into collectible Omega without mortgaging the farm and breaking the bank to buy a dive watch from the 1950s, 60s, or 70s. Guys, everything you see here is for sale. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.